Hello everyone, welcome to video number 4 of Java Fundamentals. In video 3, we started learning about conditions and we also learned about for loops. In this video, you're going to learn more about conditions and also more ways to use them. So here's a recap of video 3. These are all of the comparison conditions. So if you need to review them, then here they are. So today we are going to start learning about new conditions called logical operator conditions, and they always act on booleans. So for all four of these, A and B are both booleans, so they are either true or false. So the first logical operator condition is called and it's written as A, two and signs, and then B. And what that does is it returns true if both A and B are true, otherwise it returns false. And then there's A and two vertical signs, then B. And the vertical sign, on most keyboards, it's the same key as the backslash. Just press shift and backslash and you should get the vertical sign. So this is or, and it returns true if at least one of A and B is true, otherwise it returns false. And then we have A, and this is the caret sign. So on most keyboards, it's the same key as the 6, just press shift and then 6, and then B, all right. So this is called the exclusive OR, and it's written as XOR, and it returns true if exactly one of A and B is true. Otherwise, it returns false. And then we have an exclamation mark and then A. So this is the not, and it returns true if A is false, and it returns false if A is true. So basically, it inverts A. Here are some examples. True and false would return false. False or true would return true. True or true would return true. False, exclusive or false would return false. True, exclusive or true would return false. And not false would return true. So now we're getting into while loops. So the way you write them is first write the word while, parentheses, and then a condition such as A is less than 20, close parentheses, curly brackets, and then a block of code. So while loops continue to run until the condition is false. And if the condition is false before the first time the while loop runs, then the while loop won't run at all. So imagine that we initialized A as 200 instead. In this case, it would see that 200 is less than 20. That's false. So it won't run this block of code at all. All right, but what this code will actually output is 2, 416, and 256, because first, so we initialize A as 2, so 2 is less than 20, so this code runs. All right, so it prints out A, which is 2, and then it sets A to A times A. So right now, A is 2, so A times A would be 2 times 2, which is 4. So then A is set to 4. And then 4 is still less than 20. So this block of code runs again. It prints out 4, and then A becomes 4 times 4, which is 16. And 16 is less than 20. That's true. So it runs this code again. It prints out 16. And then A becomes 16 times 16, which is 256. And 256, is that less than 20? No, that's false. So this while loop stops. And then we get to this line right over here. So it prints out A, which is 256. And that's how we got this output right over here. All right, and then there's also do while loops. So here was while loops, and do while loops, how you write them is write do, curly brackets, a block of code, and then after the closing curly bracket, write the while statement. So for while, parentheses, and then the condition, and at the end, put a semicolon. So do while loops, they are the same as while loops, except they run at least once, even if the condition is false in the beginning. So the conditions in this case is A is less than 20 and A is greater than 200, or sorry, 100. This is impossible. You can't have a number be less than 20 and greater than 100 at the same time. So this condition would always be false. And that means that this while loop, it won't run even once. However, with the do while loop, they run at least once. So even if this condition is false in the beginning, it runs once, and then it tests a condition. All right, so the while loop, it would output 2 because this block of code doesn't run even once, so it just prints out A. So A is 2. And then do while loops, they will print out 2 and 4. So first A is 2, and it runs this code right over here. So it prints out 2, and then it sets A to 2 times 2, which is 4. And then it tests this condition right over here. This condition is false, so it stops. And then it prints out A. So A is 4. So that's how we got 2 and 4. So now we're moving on to if statements, also known as conditionals. So the syntax is very similar to while loops. You just write if, and then it's the same as a while loop. So a condition, and then curly brackets, a block of code. So if statements run only if the condition is true. All right, so this block of code, it will output 2 and then 2, because first A is 2. So it tests if this condition is true, the condition is A is equal to 0 or A is equal to 2. That's true. So therefore, this if statement runs. So it prints out 2. All right, and then afterward, it gets here. So it prints out 2 again. And then there's also else statements. So else statements, they must come immediately after if statements. So you can have basically the closing curly bracket, and after that you can skip a line if you want, and then write the else statement, and then curly brackets, and then a new block of code. So the if statement runs if the condition is true, and the else statement runs if the condition is false. So this code right over here, it will output the variable is 2 because A is 2. So this condition right over here is true. Therefore, it runs this block of code right over here. And then, so there's if statements, there's else statements, and there's also else if statements. So here's an example of a piece of code that uses else if statements. So it uses it here and here. All right, so what this code basically does is it first tests if this condition is true. So if this condition is true, then it runs this block of code right over here. If it's false, then it moves on to this statement. So it tests if this condition is true. And if this condition is true, then it runs this block of code. If it's false, then it moves on to this statement. So it tests if this condition is true. And if this condition is true, then it runs this block of code. And if it's false, well, then it runs the else statement. So it runs this block of code right over here. All right, so this piece of code, it would output the variable is 7 because A is 7. So this condition is false because 7 is not equal to 5. All right, so it moves on to this statement right over here. So it tests if this condition is true, and it's true. 7 is equal to 7. So therefore, it runs this block of code right over here, and it ignores these two. All right, so that was basically while and if statements in a nutshell. And then there's also break and continue. So break and continue can be used inside for or while loops. So break exits out of the loop immediately, and continue ends the current iteration of the loop immediately. And to demonstrate what that means, I'll jump into replit.com. All right, so this was a piece of code that we created in video 3. It printed out the first 10 rows of the triangular multiplication table. So I'm going to go ahead and add a break statement here. So break, remember what it does is it exits the for loop or while loop immediately. So let's run this and see what it prints. All right, so it prints out 1 through 10 on different lines. So what A starts out as 1, B starts out as 1. All right, so it prints out A times B, which is 1 times 1, that's just 1. And then it breaks, so it exits this for loop immediately. All right, so then we get here, so it starts a new line. All right, and then it increments, this for loop increments a by 1, so a is now 2, and then b is 1, so this for loop runs, it prints out a times b, which is 2 times 1, so it prints out 2, and then it breaks, so it exits this for loop immediately. All right, so now we're here again, it starts a new line. All right, and then it increments a to 3, and then we get to this for loop again, so b is 1. All right, so it prints out 3 times 1, and then it exits this for loop immediately. So it keeps on continuing. It basically just, every time it prints out a times b, and b is always 1 because we break out of this for loop before b has a chance to increment. And so this keeps on continuing until we get to 10. Now I'm going to move this break statement to here. So now let's see what this does. All right, so it only prints out 1. And the reason is because first we have a is 1 and b is 1. Okay, so it prints out 1 times 1, and then increments b by 1. So b becomes 2, and 2 is already not less than or equal to 1. So this for loop finishes. All right, and then we start a new line and then break. So break makes us exit the current for loop. And the current for loop that we're in right now is this one right over here. So we exit this for loop. So that means that our code is finished immediately after we print out 1. So now I'm going to demonstrate the continue statement. So I'll first make a piece of code. All right, so continue. What it does is it ends the current iteration of the for loop or while loop immediately. So let's see what this code right here does. All right, so it keeps on printing out 2 forever and ever. The reason for this is because we have a is 2, so 2 is less than 3, so this while loop runs. All right, so it prints out 2, and then if a is equal to 2, that's true, then we run this. So we continue. So continue, basically it ends the current iteration immediately. So that means that it doesn't reach this statement right over here. It just goes back. So it tests if a is still less than 3. So a hasn't changed at all. A is still 2. So therefore, it's this condition is true. So it runs this block of code again. So it prints out a, which is 2. If a is equal to 2, then continue. So then we go back. So is a less than 3? A hasn't changed. It's still 2. This is true. So it prints out a again. And then it will just keep on printing out a over and over again forever. So this is known as an infinite loop. So basically an infinite loop means that it never finishes. Here's another example of an infinite loop. All right, so this code right over here never finishes because this statement is always true. But you can still exit this loop by using the break statement. So now let's change this up a little bit. Right, so this was basically the same thing as the while loop. However, a for loop is different because every time after an iteration of a for loop, it performs the increment or decrement. So even if you have a continue statement, it will still perform this increment or decrement. So if you were to run this, then it would only print out 2 one time because after printing out 2, so after continuing, it will increment a by 1. So then a becomes 3, and then 3 is not less than 3. So then immediately afterward, this for loop finishes. All right, so this time it only prints out 2 once. Here's an optional exercise. So start with any positive integer, print it out, then repeat the following process until the number becomes 1. If the number is even, divide it by 2. If the number is odd, multiply it by 3 and add 1, and print out the resulting number. So for example, if you start with 3, the output should be 3 because you first print it out, and then 3 is odd, so you multiply it by 3 and add 1, so it becomes 10, and then 10 is even, so you divide it by 2, it becomes 5, and 5 is odd, so you multiply it by 3 and add 1, it becomes 16, and then you keep on dividing it by 2 because you get an even result each time. So 8, 4, 2, and then 1. So you got to 1, so then you stop. All right, so if you want to give this exercise a try, then pause the video here and keep watching the video for the solution. Here's the solution. So we first want to have a variable. We'll call it a. You can make it any positive integer. All right, so first we print it out. All right, and we wanted to repeat a process until the number is 1. So we can just do while a is not equal to 1. All right, and so if the number is even, so we can tell if it's even if the remainder when it's divided by 2 is 0. So if a percentage 2 equals 0, then we divide it by 2. So a slash equals 2, else, because if a is not even, then it has to be odd. So else we set a to 3 times itself plus 1. So a equals 3 times a plus 1. All right, and each time we want to print out what a is. All right, let's run this. All right, it prints out exactly what we wanted. So the topics covered in this video were conditions, while and do while loops, if statements, break, and continue. If you want, go ahead and make your own programs. And you don't only have to use these topics. You can use anything that you've learned so far. For more educational content, make sure you are subscribed. And that's it for this video. So I'll see you in video number 5.